What's up, everybody? Today's project is removing and replacing a rear hub on my 2020 Shelby GT500. This is the third time I'm doing this project. I did it once with a buddy's car. We pulled out his hubs to put longer studs for putting carbon fiber wheels on his base model. I then had a wheel stud break on my passenger side, swapped out the hub. Now I had one break on my driver's side. So this car, I am constantly taking the wheels on and off all the time because I do a lot of track events with this car. So impact on, off, it just stresses the wheel studs. They eventually break. The rear swapping of the rear hubs, not a fun project. Front hubs, much easier. There's 4 bolts on the back side that hold the hub in. Easy access on the fronts. No issues there. You get torque wrench on, torque things to spec. The rear, everything's in the way. You've got the half shafts blocking. You got all the suspension blocking. Just a pain in the ass. You end up having to take multiple socket extensions and universal joints, going in at weird angles to get at those bolts on the back. Not a lot of fun. Here's the culprit, broken wheel stud right here. Ironically, I was just telling my wife I was way ahead on getting this car ready for a track event down in Coda. I said, I'll be done way early unless I break a wheel stud. And that was foreshadowing because I broke a wheel stud. I've broken, 3 rear studs. One just swapped the stud, and now I'm just replacing the hubs just because these things have been beat up so badly. My front studs have not broken because I replaced those long ago with heavier duty truck studs. That's an older video about camber bolts, wheel spacers, and 4-inch studs up front. Those things have taken a beating. The rear studs here, they've been breaking on me, but let's see, I started tracking this car at the beginning of 21, and it's now mid-25, so, multiple on and off impacts over, 4.5 years or so. So I expect them to be good for a while again, but you can see, the stress marks on there from just over and over, on and off. So here we go, replace the driver's side hub. Fortunately, I had the parts in stock here in my parts bin. This is the hub for the rear. That's how it mounts in there with those 4 bolts. I'll show the part number now on the box. This is the one-time use axle nut. That's that guy right there in the middle. That's a torque to yield. We'll be doing that later when we're reinstalling, but here's the part number. And then your 4 hub bolts for the rear right here. I'll show the part numbers for that. As well as if you're doing the fronts, I'll show the part numbers for those bolts as well. Those are one-time use bolts. So the big picture is remove the caliper. There's 2 bolts on the backside of those. I think those are 18 millimeters if I remember correctly. I'm gonna suspend the caliper off with these hooks here, brake hooks. Hang it there so I don't have to disconnect the line. Then remove the e-brake. These are not the bolts here. Bolts are in the back here, and they're kind of blocked. I think those are 1/2 inch if I remember correctly. Once we get both calipers off, we'll remove the brake rotor disc. I do have a thin spacer, and I'll pull that off as well. And then start removing, the big nut here and trying to get access to the nuts that are the bolts in the back. Got the caliper off. I got that hung, like I said, with the little brake hangers. These bolts are in fact 18 millimeter. Next up, I removed the axle nut here, just because if you don't have a high power impact, you're gonna need to set the e-brake, and then hopefully that holds it. If it doesn't hold it, you're gonna have to have somebody hold the brakes to keep this from spinning while you're using a heavy duty socket. But my impact, it worked hard, but it got it off, and that is 1.25 inches. For the e-brake, like I said, these are not the bolts. The bolts are back here, and they are in fact 1/2 inch. I started them with a socket. I used that big one for the bottom, and I used a smaller one for the top, just due to the space. But then, especially the top one here, you're not gonna be able to back it all the way out with a socket because of this here. So I switched to this ratcheting box head after they're loosened. And then again, just hang the caliper up Got the e-brake caliper removed. I just zip tied it to this right here, got it out of the way. A couple things worth mentioning on the e-brake. Make sure obviously it's not set or it's gonna be squeezing and you're not gonna be able to get it off the car. Then also when you're removing this top bolt, you're gonna be ratcheting towards the back of the car. Don't hit this. I actually saw a guy at the track with one of these cars that had this broken, and he's wondering how the heck that happened. And I suspect whoever was wrenching on his car, either him or somebody else, was going aft and hit this. So don't break this. This is part of your ABS speed sensor bracket right there. With the caliper out of the way, we get a good look at the hub. These are the 4 bolts here that need to be removed. And again, they're on the back side with the axle half shaft in the way. You got shocks, springs, the IRS cradle, all sorts of stuff's in the way, so it gets real sporty. So the fun bolts. I've found that this combination here, short extension, this is a 1/2-inch drive. These are 15mm bolts, by the way. Short extension, 1/2-inch drive, standard socket size, you know, not like a long breaker bar because there's no room for those. But 3 of these bolts you can get access to. The 2 on the back side and the bottom one on the front side. This top one on the front side is a mother bastard. I've done it on the other projects with long extensions back through by the half shafts there. I think I might get creative and do something differently on this one. I'll know better once I get these other 3 bolts out. I've got the 3 somewhat accessible bolts out, the 2 on the aft side, the forward bottom one. This top one here is just a pain in the ass because you got all of this in the way. You got the half shaft and this piece here. I think my strategy for this one, and like I said, this is the 3rd time I'm doing this, maybe work smarter, not harder. Going in through long extensions way back in there and coming in at a slight angle. I've done that before. It's not straight on. I've rounded the bolts. I have extras to use anyways, but new ones. But I think I'm gonna take this nut off here, slide out this. I use a dead blow there, kind of a rubber mallet, if you will, and pounded the bolt back, stuck another bolt in on this side to help pound it out through the hole. And now I got this piece up and out of the way. Now this is not really rotating, and it's probably due to the half shaft that's holding it in position. But this thing was a major blocker getting into that bolt, so I think I'm gonna have a much better access now to that bolt. So with this guy up out of the way, I am now straight onto that bolt. I don't have to worry about rounding it off. That's a good thing. I've got a long 15mm socket. I've got a short stubby 3/8" extension. And then I've got a torque wrench on there just because it gives me better leverage than a short little 3/8" drive ratchet. I'll get it started with that, and then I'll switch to the shorter ratchet, which will have more travel room in there. And that should now come out nicely. Much better. You know what they say, each time you do a project, it gets easier. The first time I did this project, and I'll post that link above, we're swapping my buddy's hubs, or swapping out the wheel studs, but pulling all 4 hubs. That took us all damn day. That was a steep learning curve. Second time I did the passenger side. I didn't film a video on that, but it was a little bit easier just kind of knowing how I had to go in back through all the long extensions. With all the long extensions, and moving this guy up out of the way was a much better helper. So last bolt here, the forward top side, came out pretty easily once that was out of the way. And then I used my dead blow down there, just knocked the half shaft back out, and there's the hub. It came out. Be careful you don't break your little ABS sensor that sits down there, but came out pretty quickly. I used just a steel wire brush, cleaned up all the outside surface, cleaned around the inside. Again, be careful that ABS sensor up top center there. And then I also cleaned the threads on the half shafts here. Got all the old thread lock off of it. Just to clean everything up nicely before reinstallation. These hub mount bolts on the back side are considered one-time use. They're not torque to yield, it's just because they come with a thread locker on them. If you're not going to replace your bolts, just clean up the threads, put new thread locker on, and then Mechanic 101, make sure you get all 4 on the back side threaded in, started before you go tightening any of them down. And then 81 foot-pounds is the torque on these guys. I was actually able to torque all 4 hub bolts to 81 foot-pounds. I was able to use my big digital nice torque wrench on all but one, and then I had to use that shorter, older click style one. So the 2 aft and the bottom forward, I used the big torque wrench going through different angles, and then I did the front bolt here with the shorter torque wrench up this way through the fender. Next up is this hub bolt. That is a one-time use torque to yield. And that is 85 foot-pounds plus 30 degrees. So torque it to 85 foot-pounds, then mark 30 degrees and continue to rotate it. I used my impact on a low setting just to thread the nut on there. I am going to reassemble everything to use the e-brake to hold the hub while I tighten this down, 85 foot-pounds plus 30 degrees. Don't forget to reinstall this bolt, reinstall your sensor here, just push that down. Probably didn't even need to do that. I was envisioning this rotating down a little bit, but no, I can push that back in there right now. Make sure everything's torqued to spec. I use thread locker in the e-brake just because I've had a bolt back out before at the track, so use thread locker there. These are considered one-time use bolts. I always reuse them. Just put some thread locker on there, clean up the threads, put some thread locker back on there. And I'll also show the torque specs for this one. You gotta look it up. Put some new blue thread locker on there and tighten that down to 76 foot-pounds of torque. The caliper mount bolts, the 2 bolts on the back, they're considered one-time use. Again, they're not torque to yield. They're just they just have pre-existing thread locker from the factory. I clean them up with a wire brush, put some more blue thread locker on the bolts and torque them down. You can see my torque wrench is still on there. You get in from the bottom side there, 103 foot-pounds. E-brake is remounted, 2 bolts on the back. I don't use a torque wrench on there because there's not a lot of room back here. I just use a box head and go tight, but the official book answer is 35 foot-pounds. And I did clean the threads and put new blue thread locker on there. Last piece of the puzzle, this hub nut here, axle nut, whatever you want to call it. I got the e-brake reinstalled, went up in the car, set the e-brake. That locked the rotor here from spinning. Then I marked, you can see my marks on the axle here. So I marked top dead center, 0, right 90 degrees, and then halfway between those is 45 degrees. This is 85 foot-pounds and then 30 degrees. I put a little mark on the nut. I set it to 85 foot-pounds with my torque wrench, and then just kept going little bit by little bit until I watched this mark, and it looks like it's about 30 degrees-ish. Close enough, and I'll call that good. One last thing, I hope everybody knows you can get all these parts at Middleton Motorsports for cost plus 10% if you use the Shelby Flyer discount code. Contact Jeff, the parts guru. I'll put his phone number and email below. But that's it. That's how you swap out the hub on a 2020 through 2022 GT500. This time is a little bit quicker, a little bit easier of a job with the added step that I did there. Thanks for watching. See you next time.